So it's possible that one may be using a bash as a shell. Other person may be using, if he feels that he's comfortable in uh, C shell, so he might be using C shell as the default shell or as the base shell. So that is up to you, like what kind of shells you prefer to use. But there is a default shell which is always started by default whenever you are connected to the system, and which particular shell should be default shell by for the user, that is decided by the super user. And in case of Linux or in case of Unix, the super user uh, is called root. So root is the name of super user. So super user has the privilege of creating the users. He is responsible for managing all kind of activities related to Unix or Linux server, and the users who are to be created on the system, that is also done by super user or root. So he is a privileged user and he has all kind of rights. He can manage, he can take the backup. So these kind of jobs are to be carried out by super user only. So we'll see these operations when we'll study system administration of the Linux. But before that, since we are working as ordinary users, so we should make ourselves accustomed with the use of frequently used Linux commands. So we'll see those commands, but prior to that, we have to understand the concepts, fundamental concepts related to Linux or operating system. So here I have shown you a diagram. That diagram you must have studied as part of operating system. This is called a process life cycle. So here we are having different states. But prior to that, we must understand what is the process. What is a process? So normally it is said that process is the running replica of any program. To some extent, it is true that the running replica of program is a process. But process is not merely, when you look at this definition, you feel that the process is nothing but the binary replica of the code of that program. So that is not true. Actually, process is more than just code. Normally, it gives the impression that whenever we are loading any program to computer's main memory, it becomes a process. Yeah, it's true. It becomes a process, but this process is not the code of that program only. It has many more information that is required for smooth functioning or smooth execution of this process. So you can understand that process is an active entity and program is a passive entity. And as long as whatever code you have written is lying on the hard disk, we say it is a program. The moment when you try to execute this program, a process corresponding to this program is created in the RAM. So it is the process which is executed in the RAM. So we say interchangeably that yes, it is a program or it's a process. But you should understand that process is not merely the code part. It has more than the coding part. So whenever any number of programs are executed, you know that it's a multi-user environment. It's possible that many users must be submitting different programs from different terminals. So corresponding to every program, process is created. Similarly, it is also possible, since it is a multitasking operating system. So many users must be initiating a number of tasks from their terminals. I mean, I may start 3 or 4 programs. So all these programs belong to me and I'm the owner of that programs, but corresponding to my submitted 4 programs, 4 processes will be created in the RAM. So you can have a scenario where multiple processes are existing in the RAM and then they are to be executed. So now what is happening? Suppose we are using Pentium as a i5, i7 as a server machine. So all these programs, they are going to that Pentium or that i7's RAM for execution. Now there is only one processor, and that processor is responsible for execution of all these programs, all these processes actually. So what will happen? All these processes, they are ready for execution, but what they are missing is the microprocessor for execution. So all these programs, they are forming a queue, and that queue is called a ready queue. So diagrammatically I have shown that we are having this ready queue, and this ready queue is the queue of multiple programs. And since you have studied data structure, there you have seen that all these processes, when they are forming the queue, so queue structure is what? Queue is letting the nodes or the processes to leave from front end and to add from rear side. So it is practically similar to what we do in banking system when we are going to bank to take the cash. We are forming a queue, and the person who is standing in front of that queue is the first one who is getting the services of that cash payment. So the moment when he or she is being served by the bank official, he is leaving the queue. And similarly, any other person, if he is coming late, so he'll be joining that queue from the rear side. So in the same way, it is happening in case of ready queue also. That is why this is called a queue structure. So here all these programs are ready for execution. So they are forming a queue, and one by one these processes are getting their turn for execution. And when any process is getting its turn for execution, it is changing its state from ready to run state. Now, since we know that we are having only one microprocessor inside the system, or even if we are having multiple processors, they may not be compared with the total number of processes which are available in the RAM for execution. You may be having finite number of processors, maybe 3 or 4 or 5, but the number of programs which corresponding to them, the process which are created in the RAM, they are in hundreds. So obviously you have to have some strategy. The operating system has to have some strategy to decide which process should get the turn for run state. So in this way, the process which is getting the turn is changing its state, and it moves from ready to run state. Now I'm just taking a pause. I'm sorry. So that process which is moving from ready to run state. Now you know that the process which is moving into run state, if that process is very long, then obviously it will keep the microprocessor busy for longer period. So we have to be fair for other processes, and since they are also waiting in ready queue, so obviously we should have some strategy so that the process which is currently in run state should occupy the microprocessor only for a small time period, so that the other process can also get the turn. So suppose we are having a program or process which has moved from ready to run state, and this much portion of that process has executed till now. But since we are having a fixed amount of time uh, for which this program or this process is allowed to get executed, so soon after this, when this much portion is executed, the program or the process is leaving this run state. And if it needs only the services of microprocessor, and since the turn is over, so it will move from here to ready state once again. So it will be added to the rear side of the ready queue. And it may also be possible that when this process which is currently in run state has executed this much, but now it requires some data to be taken from hard disk. Say the allowed time may be still left, and the process still has the time to occupy the microprocessor or to keep the service to get the services of microprocessor. But since it needs data for further execution and that data is not available, so in that case also it is leaving the run state because it needs data. Then only it can be executed by the microprocessor. So obviously it will move to take the data, and from where it has to take the data, say for example, it has to take the data from hard disk. Since hard disk is very slow in comparison to RAM or in comparison to the speed with which the process is getting the services of microprocessor, so it may be possible that when it goes to take the data from hard disk, there may be some other process which are already taking data from hard disk. Since hard disk is a device which is having mechanical shafts, etc., so its speed cannot be matched up with the RAM, with the speed of RAM or speed of microprocessor. So, and at any time that hard disk may be used by only one process to take its data. So there is a possibility then this process is moving to a hard disk to take the data. There may be some other processes which are already requiring the services of the hard disk. So they are also forming a queue for the services of hard disk. So they are forming a wait queue. So when this is happening, that this process which we have just discussed, that it needs data, when it comes to this state, and here it finds that the hard disk is already busy in serving some other process which has to wait. So now this process has converted from run state to wait state. Now you may ask that why we are assuming that there are already some processes which are taking some data. It may be possible that this is the first process which goes to take the data from hard disk. Yes, it is true that it may be the first process. When it goes, it may get the service of hard disk, but that service again needs some time, because hard disk, being very slow device, is taking lots of time to give the data to this process. As and when the data becomes ready with this process is changing its state, and it moves again from wait state to ready state. So we have the possibility that this process, which was earlier we have submitted, or that process has got the turn for execution on the microprocessor. We have seen that if it is the time slot for which it is allowed to take the services of microprocessor, if that time slot is exhausted, then it goes directly and gets added to the rear side of the ready queue. If the time is still left, but it needs some data, and that data has to be taken from hard disk, then obviously it has to take that data from hard disk. And after getting the services, because till the point it is taking the services of hard disk, we cannot keep the microprocessor idle. So obviously the next program in the queue is getting its turn, and microprocessor becomes busy in executing that second program. But the first program, which was earlier gone to the wait state, is now getting services of the hard disk, and once the service is over, it is again added to the rear side of the ready queue. And the third possibility is that within the stipulated time, I mean, if it is allowed that this process has to execute for delta t second, and during delta t second, this program is completing its execution, because it is possible that the program or the process may be very small and it takes very little time for execution. So it's possible that once it is given the services of microprocessor, it is completing its execution within that stipulated time, which was given to this process first time. So in that case, this process is moving to the terminate state, and the result of that completion will be shown to the corresponding terminal of the user. So user gets this impression that yes, he has got his program executed, and result is displayed on the screen. So when a process is leaving the ready queue, it has the and it moves to run state. From there, it has the possibility of either switching directly to ready queue once again, or it has the possibility to switch to the wait state from the run state, and then from there it goes to ready queue, or it has the possibility of moving from run state to terminate state. Okay. So once it is going to terminate state, that process result is shown on the corresponding screen, and the job of that process is over, and it is discarded from the memory. So by this way, every process is getting the turn. So here it is important that what kind of algorithm the corresponding operating system is using to decide which out of these many or multiple processes should get the turn for execution on microprocessor. So related to that, you must have studied a number of strategies which are called CPU scheduling algorithms. And I'm just reminding you, like one of them was FCFS, first come first serve. Second was SJF, shortest job first. And you must have studied that there is a strategy called round robin time shares. That is the most efficient one, because the previous two, which I just took the name like FCFS and SJF, they were not fair for the processes, because FCFS was non-preemptive, and if it is non-preemptive, that the process which is getting that turn and moving to run state for the entire its lifetime, it is keeping that microprocessor engaged. So that will hamper the execution of other processes which are lying in the ready queue. So obviously this is not fair. So the fair one which is being used in Unix and Linux is round robin time shared. So every process which is lying in ready queue and changing its state to run state is given the CPU or microprocessor only for fixed amount of time, and we say that this time is the time quantum or time slice. So only for fixed amount of time or time quantum, the process is getting the turn, and irrespective of the fact whether within that delta t time it is completing its execution or it is not completing its execution, the process the operating system takes that microprocessor back from that process, and the process is bound to go either to the ready queue or to the wait state, depending upon the situation. So you can imagine that if the process requires total 25 microsecond time for its execution, but 25 microsecond time के case में suppose we are having only 5 microsecond time quantum, that means in a single go the process when it moves to run state is getting the chance of using microprocessor only for 5 microseconds. So obviously during 5 microsecond it cannot complete its execution, because we assume that if the microprocessor is fully dedicated to this process, it must have completed its execution in 25 microsecond. But since we are having the restriction that no process can occupy the microprocessor for more than 5 microsecond time quantum, so obviously this process is bound to move either to the ready queue or it is bound to move to the wait state, depending upon the situation. If it needs data, it has to move to wait state. If it doesn't need data, but only the services of microprocessor, so it has to move to ready queue. And by the way, I'm telling you, when we write any program, so the execution of any program has multiple statements. Like you can see your C program or C++ program. There are certain programs like C in type of program where you have to give the data from keyboard. So they are very slow because they are human speed dependent. So how fast you are giving the data, irrespective to that, the statement like C is equal to A plus B must be completing its execution so fast in comparison to C in. Okay, C in will take a lot of time. Similarly, when you are writing any program and giving the data from keyboard, we may be having a situation where we are writing a program and that program has to take the data from hard disk. For example, if we are processing the pay slip, or we are generating the pay slips of all the employees of Malvias, and obviously we have to have the data related to all the employees stored in a file, because it's not possible that every month we feed all 300 employees data. So we can keep that data in some file, and we can let the program to take that data from that file, as we do in case of programming file handling. So that data will be taken from the file, and then it is processed, and the corresponding result is either shown to the screen or it must be stored in some other file on the hard disk, so that later on you can print simply that output file and you can get all the payslips generated. So in most of the practical cases, we are not letting the program to take the data from keyboard, because we have to process the bulk data, and it's not possible that bulk data you can enter from keyboard. So obviously you have to make use of file handling concept, and the data is which is to be taken as input by the program must be lying on the hard disk in the form of a file, and then we can let the program to take that data from the file as if it is taking the data from keyboard in other cases. तो वहां से वो डाटा उठाएगा और उसके बाद प्रोग्राम को एग्जीक्यूट कर देगा. So that is the situation. That is why I'm saying that it's very easy to understand that when this program is in the run state, and if it is requiring some additional data for processing, so because in a single go it cannot take the entire data from the data file of the hard disk. So obviously it has to again and again read the data from the hard disk. So when it comes to take the data from hard disk, there is no logic of keeping the microprocessor engaged for this program, because right now it is taking the data from hard disk. So it will delay the execution of other programs. So what we can do is, when this situation is arising, then the microprocessor is leaving this program, letting this program to take its data from the hard disk, and in the meantime it becomes busy in execution of the next program which was in the ready queue. So इस तरीके से one by one all these programs are getting the turn, and eventually they keep moving to terminate state and keep showing the result on the corresponding screen. So you can imagine when we are saying that a program, if it is requiring 25 microseconds for its complete execution, it may be possible that the total time it requires for its execution in such a scenario is 50 microseconds, because we know that the microprocessor is not dedicated to this single program only. Had it be given to this process in a dedicated way, this process might have completed its execution in 25 microseconds. But since the microprocessor has to take the responsibility of execution of other programs, so obviously this program which requires 25 microseconds might have gone multiple times in wait state and ready state. So it must have completed its execution, suppose in 50 microseconds. Out of this 50 microsecond, it was actually requiring 25 microsecond for its execution. So it must be in run state for 25 microsecond at least. Remaining 25 microsecond, it was either in the wait state or in the ready queue. When it is in the ready queue, it must be waiting for its turn for getting the microprocessor once again. When it is in the wait state, it must be getting its turn. It must be waiting for to get its turn for getting the services of hard disk, and as and when it is completing its services, it is moving to ready queue. Whether it is in ready queue or it is in wait queue, in both the cases, it must be waiting for microprocessor so that it can move to run state. So we can imagine that only you must have solved some examples where you are asked to calculate the throughput, you are asked to calculate the total wait time. So that kind of numericals we do. So CPU burst is given there. So CPU burst is actually the total time which program actually requires for execution. That is 25 microsecond is this current example, and the practically required time is 50 microsecond. So if you subtract 25 from 50, so remaining 25 microsecond, the process spent where? Either it was in the wait state or in the ready state. But we say that it was in the wait state. Why? Because irrespective to whether it is ready or in wait, in both the cases it is waiting for its turn. तो हम ये कहेंगे कि ये जो है wait कर रहा था. तो अब what is happening? Suppose if I am executing any command, and if I give that command, so the moment when I finish the command and press enter, from that time, say when I press enter, the time was t1, and when the first character of the result is shown on the screen, and suppose that time is t2, so total time that command has taken for its execution was t2 minus t1. So this was the total time. So you can imagine this command, as I told you earlier, that command is nothing but the name of a program. And when I say that we are executing any command, that means we are executing that program. And when I say that we are executing the program, that means the program must have created a process, because it is the process which is actually which runs actually in RAM. When it is getting executed, it must have moved from run state to wait state to ready state, again to run state, again to wait state multiple times before finally reaching to terminate state. So the total throughput is t2 minus t1, whereas the command may require very less time in comparison to this t2 minus t1 time for its actual execution, because ये पूरे समय के लिए तो it is not getting the services of microprocessor. तो ये कभी वेट में था, कभी रेडी में था, और इसके एग्जीक्यूशन के लिए if I say that 25 माइक्रोसेकंड is required, तो 25 माइक्रोसेकंड तो इसको रन स्टेट में रहना ही रहना है, but it must take either 50 or 70 or 75, because for the remaining period either it was in ready queue or it was in wait queue. So as and when the process is completing its execution, it moves to terminate state. When I say that the process is more than the code, so that seems logical, because we have to keep track of this fact also, that if the process is executed this much, then obviously somewhere some marker must be kept, so that next time when the process is coming to run state, it has to start the execution from this point onwards. So obviously this all are the part of process only. So this kind of bookmarking, etc., these kind of information is also stored as part of process. That's why I'm saying that process is not merely the code. But this ठीक है, it is okay that we assume that the running replica of any program is process, but do not go under this impression that only the coding part of that program, when we say it is a process, only coding part of that program is a process. No, it is more than that coding. So I suppose by this diagram, with this diagram, it is clear that how the process is getting executed from moving from different states, and primarily we are having a ready state where all the processes which are submitted or which are created in the RAM, they are ready for execution, but they are missing only the services of microprocessor. As and when one process is getting the service of microprocessor, it is changing its state from ready to run state, and from run state it either moves directly to ready queue, or it may move to wait state, and eventually if it is completing its execution, then in that case it can directly move to terminate state. So we are having multiple states in the RAM, but in run state we can have only one program, not multiple. Here in ready state, you may be having multiple process in the ready state. You may be having multiple process in the wait state. You may be having multiple process in the terminate state also. Because if 10 persons are working, so they must, 5 of them must be getting their the output of their submitted commands. So their commands or the process corresponding to those commands, they have completed their execution. That's why they have moved to terminate state. So we are having multiple programs in the terminate state. We have the possibility of having multiple programs in the wait state. Similarly, multiple programs in the ready queue or ready state, but in run state, we are having only one process. So this is the strategy called round robin time shared. Why it is called round robin? Because it is cyclic in nature. Just suppose if I am having only one book and that I have to share in my class. So obviously I'm having a class where I'm having 60 or 70 students. So obviously I have to have some strategy so that I can share that book among all my students. So I can fix some time. Like if I'm giving that book to the first person or roll number 1, so I'm asking that you have to return that book in 1 day. So after one day, that person will return that book to me, and I'll give that book next to the next person. I mean, roll number 2. So similarly, this cycle goes on, and ultimately I am reaching the last person, roll number 75. And once that person has completed his study for 1 day, he is returning that book to me, and once again I am coming back to roll number 1 so that he can do further study. So this is round robin, because in the cyclic order we are distributing that book. And time shared, because we are fixing that everybody should get the turn of only 1 day to keep that book for study. Now you can imagine that if I reduce that time, instead of 1 day, if I reduce that time to a few microseconds, so you can see, I mean, the time in which you flicker your eye, within that time, the book will once again get circulated in the entire class, and it will come before you on the table. So you will be having this impression all the time that permanently that book is available before you. क्योंकि जब तक आप एक बार बंद करके खोलते हैं तब तक वो सबको डिस्ट्रीब्यूट होकर वापस आ जाती है. दैट प्रोसेसिंग इज सो फास्ट. So you know that in computers we are having the speed of megahertz or gigahertz. So obviously the speed is very high. So when you submit any command and you get the result, you do not see any delay in the execution of that command. The moment when you finish that command or you type the last alphabet of that command and you press enter, immediately after that you get the result. So for you, it doesn't make any difference whether you are sitting on a multi-user machine environment or you are sitting on a standalone single user machine. In both the cases, you are getting the same kind of response, because in the background the processing is happening so fast that everybody is having this illusion that your system is solely available to you, and there is no delay because of the presence of other users programs in the computer's memory. So with this way we are ensuring that microprocessor, which is the most precious part of the computer, should be utilized in the 100% efficient manner. Because otherwise what will happen if we are sitting on a personal computer and we are the sole user of that system? So when we execute any program, so you know that 80% of time or more than 80% time is devoted only to take the data send the data to the terminal or to the printer. Remaining 20% or lesser than 20% is required actually for processing. So iska matlab hai ki you are underutilizing the microprocessor, because only for 20, when you take any data from keyboard, that time microprocessor is not busy or is not executing your program. Rather, there are some IO channels which are taking care of taking the data from keyboard. So microprocessor becomes idle during that period. So obviously microprocessor has to be kept busy so that we can 100% utilize the potential of microprocessor, and that we do by increasing the number of programs which microprocessor has to execute. So it is possible because of that only when you execute any program and your program gets the turn of taking the data from keyboard, during that period microprocessor may be given to the next program which is also lying in the RAM, so that it can execute that program, and during that period you are just busy in giving the input to your program. Okay. And once again, by the time you are finishing your input data, the program which was previously given to the microprocessor for execution must have completed its execution, or either it is also requiring the data to be taken from the keyboard. So again microprocessor is coming back to your program and resuming the execution. So you can imagine in multitasking it is possible that we can increase the potential of using the microprocessor with some better efficiency in comparison to single user single tasking. But in case of multi-user multitasking, we are ensuring 100% efficiency. Why? Because if it is single user multitasking, then only multiple tasks which you are initiating are there in the RAM. So they may be very less in comparison to the multi-user environment where everybody is submitting the program, and everybody is not only submitting one program but must be submitting multiple programs. So there the repository in the RAM of these programs is very large in comparison to single user multitasking, or too much high in comparison to single user single tasking. So I suppose now it is clear that corresponding to every program we are having a process. And yesterday when I was showing you the uh, practical aspect and was showing you how we can start a shell as a command with the help of a command. So there I used a command called PS, process status. And there we have seen that there is a number called PID, process identification number. So every process which is created in the RAM must be having a integer ID attached to it, and that integer ID is called process identification number. So it is possible that if I am writing any program, I might have given abc.c as a name to my program. Somebody else who is sitting besides me on different terminal is also executing a program, and he by chance he might have given his program the name abc.c. So obviously both of these programs are going in the RAM. So in order to keep track of these programs, obviously operating system doesn't take the reference of name of that program, because otherwise so there are multiple programs which are having the same name. So it must be identifying every program with the corresponding unique ID, which is temporarily assigned to that program when the process is created in the RAM, and that ID is called PID. It stands for process identification number. So is it clear? So there is some problem because of that. My Linux is not started. But anyways, we'll continue this discussion over here. So I suppose now it is clear that how we are having the process getting executed in the RAM. एक इसमें related concept और है कि we are exploiting this feature that any program. See, interchangeably, I am saying program and process, but you understand in context to process lifecycle, you always consider when I say program, it is a process only. तो जब हम इसको ऐसे पढ़ें कि इसमें इस इन चीज़ों को और भी कई तरीके से हम लोग जो है एक्सप्लॉइट कर सकते हैं, या ओएस के डिजाइनर्स जो है इसको एक्सप्लॉइट किया उन्होंने. एंड वन ऑफ द कंसेप्ट इज कॉल्ड स्वैप एरिया. ठीक है. तो you can imagine that when we when we take the reference of any multi-user machine, we must be having a number of programs in the RAM of that system, and these number of programs must have been submitted by different users. You know that now from the above process life cycle that not all programs will be in run state. Obviously, one of the programs out of these many will be in run state. Rest of the programs are waiting. They are either in the wait state or in the ready state. Now, it is possible that the program or the number of programs which have just received the services of microprocessor, they will get their turn after a long time, because there may be a very long ready queue. So obviously, in due course of time, they are moving up in the ready queue, and when they come to the front side, then only they are getting the services of microprocessor. So what we can do, or what designers of operating system have decided, that when the program or when the process is not in the run state, it must be in the wait state, irrespective whether it is in the wait state or in ready state. It must be waiting for its turn. So during that period, it is possible that such process may be shifted to a identified portion of the hard disk, and that portion of the hard disk is referred to as swap. This is called swap area. So when a process has just received the services of microprocessor and the services are over. Now that process will get the turn for processor after a long time. So there is no fun of getting or keeping this process in the RAM. So it can be temporarily shifted to the swap area. What is the advantage of that? When you are shifting this program temporarily to swap area, you are creating a space in the RAM so that some other programs submitted by different users can get the space in the RAM. So by this way, you can increase the degree of programming. When we say degree of programming, that means the number of programs which simultaneously can reside in the RAM or which can be submitted for execution. तो अगर आप देखें कि अगर हम we are not letting this process to move to swap areas, then what will happen? Unless until this process is completing its execution and move to terminate state, it should keep in the RAM only. So that will hamper the submission of other programs. Why? Because RAM is finite in the amount. So obviously we cannot imagine that RAM is infinite and we keep submitting the programs from our side, from our terminals. So obviously we have to bother for the space in the RAM also. And that's why it is thought that when the process is has just got its turn on the microprocessor, so we have the possibility of getting the next turn after a long time. So those processes can be shifted to swap area. And that swap area we are defining where? We are defining it on the hard disk. And you know that when you make the comparison in the hierarchy of memories, you know कि secondary storage device like hard disk, etc. They are very cheap because the technology involved is cheaper than the semiconductor technology involved in creation or making of the RAM. So that is why it is happening that when you configure any system, you take the hard disk in terabytes and you take RAM in gigabytes. ठीक है, आपके पास 4 GB रैम हो सकती है, 8 GB रैम हो सकती है, लेकिन आपके पास हार्ड डिस्क टेराबाइट की 1 टेराबाइट की होती है, बड़ी कॉमन है. ठीक है, तो अब आप इमेजिन करिए कि अगर आप 1 टेराबाइट रैम तो नहीं ले सकते because RAM is very costly in comparison to hard disk. And you know the cache memory. Cache is very small in size and usually it is in kilobytes. ठीक है, लेकिन अगर आप स्पीड की देखें तो it is the fastest memory, it is slower than cache and it is the slowest memory. तो यहाँ पे अगर suppose I am having a system where we have x GB of RAM and I am having a hard disk where I am having z GB of total space. Suppose y GB space on hard disk I am fixing as swap area. So whatever area you are fixing as swap area, that area is actually you are giving to operating system because that area will never be used for storage of your files. So the space available to you for storage of your files will be z minus y GB only. Only this much space is left with you where you can store your file. Y GB space that you have marked as swap area, you have given to operating system. And now the operating system will use that y GB along with x GB in the execution of the program. So we say we can imagine that this much amount of RAM practically it gives the impression that this much amount of RAM is available with the system, though actual physical RAM is only x GB, but y GB space since you have fixed on the hard disk and that space is also used by the operating system for the execution of your program. So obviously the apparent or the virtual memory will become x GB plus y GB. That means x plus y GB. तो इतना उसके पास स्पेस हो जाएगा, लेकिन अब इसमें एक कॉस्ट भी पे करनी होती है. I mean, it is not possible that very large space on the hard disk you can fix as swap area, because if you increase the size of swap area, more number of programs will be shifted. But you know that when the programs are about to get their turn, they are to be brought back to the RAM from the swap area. And where do we have this swap area? We are having this swap area on the hard disk. So obviously the technology is very slow in comparison to RAM. So the x plus y GB apparent memory you are having, but this will slow down the process of execution because shunting the program from RAM to hard disk and from reading it back to the RAM for execution will slow down the process. So, but the advantage is that you can increase the degree of programming and you can have more number of programs. So we keep a reasonable amount of swap area on the hard disk so that we can have a virtual memory or the apparent RAM as x plus y, where y is the actually space on the hard disk which you have marked as swap area. Achha, this entire process of shunting the program from RAM to swap or swap to RAM is to be done or is to be looked after by operating system, and the process that looks after this shunting of programs is called swapper. इसे हम swapper कहते हैं. तो जब हम सिस्टम को बूट करते हैं तो दिस इज आल्सो स्टार्टेड एंड दिस विल कीप मैनेजिंग द ऑपरेशन ऑफ शिफ्टिंग द प्रोग्राम्स फ्रॉम रैम टू स्वैप, स्वैप टू रैम. एक चीज और है, this YGB space which you have marked as swap area on the hard disk, in what way it is different than the remaining space z minus y. See, when we are storing any file, the file is not stored in a contiguous manner on the hard disk. The file is actually broken into a number of pieces, and then these pieces are getting stored on the hard disk. Why? Because you can take a simple example ki we may be having a bucket where we have to put some stones. If the size of stones is very large, then obviously very less number of volume you can accommodate in that bucket, and large air gaps will be there, and lesser volume you can accommodate. But if you are turning those stones in small pieces, then the storage capacity will increase, because then you will be having very lesser wastage of space due to air gap. And if you are converting it to sand, then what will happen? Then probably the most efficient way you can utilize the space of that bucket. So in the same way, you imagine when we are having very large file, if we store that file in the same way, then probably we cannot efficiently use the storage of the device, secondary storage device. So obviously we have to have the program broken into smaller pieces, and those pieces we are storing on the hard disk. So if you imagine the architecture of hard disk, so what we are having there, we are having a number of platters which are mounted on a common spindle. So when this file is stored, it is stored in pieces. So all these pieces are scattered on different platters of the hard disk. Obviously, when you wish to open this file on the screen, like if you are giving some command and you wish to display the content of this file on the screen, so all these scattered pieces are to be collected so that we can have a single logical view of that file available to us on the screen. So in order to collect these pieces, we have to have some mapping, and that map has to be used by the operating system so that it can collect all these pieces and can reform the file once again, and in the logical single view it can be presented before the user. So that map is actually a concept which you must be knowing, that FAT, file allocation table. So it's a table which is helping you, or which is helping the operating system to keep track of scattered pieces of any file. So this map, obviously when you are breaking any file into smaller pieces, you are increasing the space utilization of the hard disk, but at the same time you are decreasing the you can say you are creating an overhead actually in opening that file on the screen. Reason being, all these scattered pieces are to be collected before logically presenting that file as a single file before you. So obviously more number of smaller pieces, that means more pieces are to be collected by just referring the FAT. So more overhead in collecting these pieces. So we are having a trade-off between the speed and the space utilization. अगर आप space utilization को increase करते हैं, जैसे आप और छोटे pieces में उसको convert करते हैं, तो आपका space utilization तो बढ़ेगा, लेकिन speed of opening that file will reduce. Reason being, more number of scattered pieces are to be collected. So obviously it will take more time. So because of that only we have to keep a trade-off. Not very small pieces we should take, and neither very large pieces we should take, because if we take the large pieces, the speed will be very good, but at the same time space utilization will become very poor. So in what way this swap area is different from this hard disk? In hard disk, in the remaining area of hard disk, we follow this concept where any file when you store is not stored in a contiguous manner, rather it is stored in the form of small pieces occupying different spaces in the hard disk. And we should have some mapping which is to be used by the operating system in order to have the linkage of all these scattered pieces, so that if somebody is opening that file, all these scattered pieces can be collected and the user can have a single logical view of that file available before him. But for the remaining portion of swap, remaining portion of the hard disk which we are using as swap, we have to have this restriction that file should not be broken, rather they should be stored in contiguous manner. Why we are doing it? Because already we know that the hard disk is very slow in comparison to RAM. If we allow this kind of algorithm also, where the file is broken into a number of pieces, then obviously what will happen? In order to shunt this file back to RAM, the operating system has to first collect all these pieces. It has to then reform the file, and then only it can send the file back to the RAM. That will further delay the loading of file from swap area to RAM. And already we know that the swap area is already making a compromise with the speed of the execution. So अगर हम इस concept को भी लगा देते तो और slow हो जाता है. That is why we say that in case of swap area, we are not having this kind of restriction that the file should be stored in smaller pieces. Rather, the file is stored in contiguous manner. बिकॉज ठीक है ये कि स्वैप एरिया की एफिशिएंसी जो स्पेस की होगी वो उतनी नहीं होगी इतनी हार्ड डिस्क की, लेकिन आपको तो ऐसे ही बहुत एडवांटेज मिल गई. बिकॉज इफ यू आर हैविंग 4 GB ऑफ रैम एंड यू आर हैविंग 8 GB ऑफ स्वैप एरिया और 16 GB ऑफ स्वैप एरिया, सो अपेरेंटली यू आर हैविंग 24 GB ऑफ मेमोरी, बिकॉज 4 GB उसकी और उसके बाद या 8 GB उसकी और 16 GB इसकी, तो टोटल 24 GB हो गया. तो ऑलरेडी यू हैव इंक्रीज द अपरेंट मेमोरी. But at the same time you have to keep track ki there should not be very slow processing of the files because of the increased space in swap area. So that is why we are keeping track of this. We have to have a reasonable amount of area marked on the hard disk as a swap area. So I suppose this is now clear, and you understand that this swapper, which is actually looking after this operation of shunting the programs between swap area and hard disk, that swapper we are not starting, rather by default it is started by the kernel, and those processes which are started by kernel, they are referred to as system processes. You please keep it in mind that if any program which you are executing corresponding to that program a process is created, but since that program you have initialized, you have initiated, so any process created for your command or for your program is a user process because you have created them. But any process which is started by the kernel for a smooth functioning of the entire system, that is called system process. तो system process वही होते हैं जो system या OS start करता है. जैसे one of the examples is swapper. Swapper is a system process because we are not starting it. It is started by the kernel, and it keeps working throughout the time. During that period the system is functioning. So continuously it is looking after this operation. So with this I'm ending my lecture here only, and I will also make this recording available offline, but my submission is कि you please be regular in attending the class and learn whatever practically we are executing on the system. So tomorrow we'll discuss how can we install Ubuntu, and then we'll see the practical implementation of different commands on Linux platform. So with this I'm ending my lecture. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.